are, my response will be, we got to wait. There's no new information. So I apologize. I wish that wasn't the answer. I like to be able to give people more concrete direction, but that is the answer. Don't go out and spend the funds if there's not a legit business purpose until you get more guidance.
Cool. So we'll make sure if you want to be on the list to get the PPP updates, you can go to cfeclass.com/Oasis. We'll make sure you get an email saying, hey, we have some new stuff. That being said, we're going to continue on kind of what we started Friday and hit the concept of the profit flywheel. So today we're going to do that. For next Friday, we will continue to expand upon it. So make sure that you're on the list. I'll show you how to get on the list and all that stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, share some stuff that I've only shared with private members. It's kind of just some of the underpinnings of the profit flywheel from the marketing and sales perspective. And what I'm going to do here, can you see my screen?
I can. I love this. I love this because it's your slides. You got slides the last two sessions, so I'm digging that.
I took Dan's slides. Said, "Dude, you're writing a book. Let me make it so you could just show up and answer questions for a couple weeks." So it's and it's cool because Dan and I use the same concepts, very very similar concepts. I spend more time in a marketing frame, and naturally spends more time in a professional skeptic frame. So you're going to see a lot of the same concepts, but perhaps from a different view. And when we talk about the profit flywheel, again, recapping from Friday, we're making an assumption. And this is in all of Dan's stuff. It's in all of my onboarding stuff. And that assumption is that you have something you want to do. You are in business to achieve something other than work in your business. If that's not true, this may not be as useful to you. But if you're trying to fund, your daughter's college tuition, if you're trying to retire, if you're trying to get more time back for yourself, you want to sleep better at night, you want to take your family on vacation, all these things that your business should be funding, the profit flywheel is the methodology we put together to make sure that every step is getting you closer to the things that actually matter. There's things like speed, speed kills. Hear that a lot. It is possible to move really, really fast in a big circle and not actually get any closer to the things that matter. It is also possible to move really, really fast in the wrong direction and get further away from the things that matter. So we got to get clear on the things that actually matter to us. So this whole methodology is not necessarily how to get more revenue. You could spend $1 million and generate an extra 800,000. Probably not going to get you any closer to those life goals of yours being $200,000 in the hole. Maybe it will. I don't know. So we want to get clear on that. And if you want to join live, we are for sure, it's Monday now as we're doing this, but we're for sure going to go live every Friday. So if you want to be on the Zoom, go to cfeclass.com/next. We're going to do as much Q&A and workshopping as possible. Okay, so cfeclass.com/next. Now, the profit flywheel. If you were here on Friday, you'll be familiar with what the profit flywheel consists of, which is 2 of Dan's methodologies and 2 of mine that we've put together to create, again, a flywheel. It should be a wealth acceleration flywheel that gets you closer and closer to the things that matter. The first component is cash flow engineering. It's Dan's methodology. Can often go into a company and double their profits overnight. And when I say overnight, I mean on paper. It might take 20, 30, 40 hours to actually make the changes. But cash flow engineering is viewing your business through that professional skeptic lens and making sure that we are always managing our cash appropriately and we are funding our goals. Customers for life. It's my methodology for marketing, sales, retention, referrals, raving fans. It turns out that if you have a tremendous amount of retention, the cash flow engineering stuff works out a lot better for you, right? When you have tons of committed revenues for a very long time, it makes the cash flow engineering process much more effective, much simpler. And when you do a lot less guessing, when you have a history of retention. The third being the revenue multiplication. So if you have a business or an offer or an income stream and the cash flow has been engineered, so it's as profitable as it can be given the circumstances, you have the customers for life baked in, you retain people, you market, you sell effectively, you get a lot of referrals, culture is good, all that stuff. Naturally, we want to look to adding another stream of revenue or another stream of income or another way to fund our priorities. So the revenue multiplication methodology, which is a live masterclass we're teaching right now, is the process, the systematic adding of income streams. Okay. And again, don't have time to get into the methodology, but it's brilliant. And it's all around adding these streams of revenue, increasing profit, increasing revenues while reducing or mitigating risk. Because if you have more than one offer, some of us, that live in the marketing and sales frame have about 27 offers floating around. Each one you add a little bit of risk. And what we want to do is add them in a way that mitigates risk, gets us closer to our goals, so we don't have 14 different jobs, which is where most people end up. I'm going to talk about that in today's training and overview. And get cash now. We'll talk about that as well. The ability, it goes into cash flow engineering. It's built into customers for life, and the revenue multiplication as you add streams of income. We want to develop the ability to generate cash on demand. Right? There are many, many reasons we might need to pull what I call an ACE card, which is the ability to dive in and generate 50 grand, 100 grand, 20 grand on demand. Now, when you have all these things baked in, you have the profit flywheel. So we're going to break down a few components of that. Today, I'm going to break down an audience audit. Dan touched on this a little bit on Friday. Really get an idea of where your audience is. If you need to generate cash, you have to know how to talk to your people. You have to know where they're at. If you want to add another stream of revenue, another stream of income, launch a new offer or pivot, you have to be able to communicate with the people that already know who you are. They already potentially are raving fans of yours. And get cash now. Okay, so there's a component of get cash now. Again, if you want to generate revenue or you need to generate revenue quickly, we have to know where our audience is, and we have to know how to speak to them. So I'm going to cover a little bit of that in the comments. Just let me know that makes sense. You're tracking along. I'm going through this really quick because it's all been covered in the various courses, including the Platinum membership. Somebody drop a comment. Let me know. We're good in the chat. Cool. So similar to last week, the question is always, should I do a thing? Sitting around, twiddling your thumbs, staring at the wall, looking at your bank statement, whatever it is, should I do a thing? Or maybe a need, hey, I have to do something. And what thing should I do next? Again, we covered that in length last week. Very, very similar concept. Should I do a thing, and which thing should I do next? Last week we covered the 4 lenses, and we talked about the reality that a new thing is always unknown. There's always a risk. So what we want to do is create asymmetry. We want to make sure that it's asymmetrical risk in our favor. You can absolutely have asymmetry the other way, which Dan and I talk about all the time. You can make a big bet that doesn't have any upside, and that would be asymmetry not in your favor. That'd be unfavorable asymmetry. So we want to make sure if we're making a bet that we're rigging the game, the upside is greater than the downside, and we're more likely, or we have a higher probability of winning than experiencing ruin. Okay. So today, I'm going to get through this, try to get this all in on time. It's a lot. Just taught this to my group of private clients, and it was a couple hours long, but there's a lot of workshopping. So we're going to get through this. We're going to look at the barbell. I explain it a little bit differently, but Dan has a version of the financial barbell, which I hope we get into in the next week or two. We want to see if the barbell is balanced or if it's asymmetrical, and in which direction. I'm going to explain what that means, because there is one form of asymmetry that's okay. It's low risk. There's another form of asymmetry that is extremely, extremely high risk. And there's a middle of the barbell, which is where most people are. I'm going to explain what that means so you can identify it. and potentially take actions to get out of the middle and create a more favorable asymmetry and risk. And I'll show you what that looks like. If you haven't seen me teach the barbell, lots of stuff around I can send out to anybody that's here. And then an audience audit. The biggest thing people say when they want to pivot is, hey, I'm going to do this thing. It's going to be low ticket. It'll be much lower barrier, or I'm going to do a premier version. It'll be higher ticket. I'll deliver a much higher level of service. I think people are going to buy it. And we say, cool, how are you going to communicate with them? And they'll say something like, I don't know, I'll do Facebook Lives. The issue is Facebook, we have no idea who they're going to show that to or why or how, right? That algorithm is a black box, which means we have very, very little control. We have very little certainty or power over whether or not our people are going to see it. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to identify the platform our audience is hanging out on and where they are on the diffusion scale so that we can talk to them the appropriate way and have much more control over what they see and how they receive it. All that makes sense so far. Dan, does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Cool. So we're going to cover the barbell real quick, and we'll have Q&A, and we could touch on this. I think I'll probably just extend Friday a little bit for this, or extend this out to Friday. We want to say, is the barbell balanced, and is it asymmetrical? In which direction? So I'm going to explain the barbell, and please, as you're watching, just drop your comments in the chat. Biggest takeaways. I want to see what's resonating, what's not resonating, so that we can further simplify this. This is a bimodal strategy. And so I call it the barbell, but this is actually first time I was exposed to it was Seneca. Seneca has his bimodal strategy for mitigating risk. And the marketing side, the marketing and sales side, and it carries over to the deliverable and finance as well. But the marketing and sales side, there are two sides of the barbell. There's upside. It is unknown, and it is unreliable because it's unknown. And what I've done is I've called that explore on the explore exploit continuum, which I think we actually talked about Friday. So when we explore a thing, we explore it because it's unknown. If it was known, we wouldn't have to explore it. On the other side is reliable, predictable, and known, right? Call that exploit. This is also, I've seen this in explained in like investing strategies, right? When we start a new thing, so again, we're going back to revenue multiplication, get cash now. Hey, we got to do something. When we start a new thing, it is unknown. And the assumption is we start it because there's upside. That upside could be financial, it could be relational, it could be legacy, but we start something because of the upside it represents. Does that make sense? Drop in the chat, let me know.
Perceived upside.
Yeah, perceived upside. We start a business because we're going to have a laptop lifestyle, or we're going to finally be able to fund these things, or whatever it is. I don't like giving examples because I don't want to like pigeonhole people into thinking what it's supposed to be. But we start a thing because there's a perceived upside. So we explore. The idea then, so in a business context, is we start our upside. And then you see a lot of rhetoric. You should work on your business, not in your business. Your business should work for you, not you work for it, so on and so forth. And what that suggests is that we want to move it over here to where it is an asset that works for us. It's reliable, it's predictable, and it's known. This could be something like a real estate portfolio. You get into real estate because of the upside. Eventually, hopefully, it's reliable, it's predictable, it's known. Somebody else is running it. You know, if you put in 2 hours of work a week, everything gets done. This does not necessarily mean passive. It means you can predictably say, look, if I do 3 hours of this every week, everything gets done. And so does that make sense? Let me know in the chat the difference between reliable and passive. They're not synonymous in this case. It is simply, I know that if I do X, Y, Z, A, B, C will be the result. That's reliability to me. Okay. So we want to get our business or a new offer from one side, which is the upside, the explore, all the way over to the reliable asset. Again, not passive, but reliable. What happens is most of us get stuck right in the middle. It no longer has the upside because we're already doing 60 hours a week. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. We can't possibly work more hours. And so it feels like there's no upside now, but it's also not reliable. One week I have to do 10 hours. The next week I have to do 40. Everything breaks. Right? And so what you have when you don't have the upside and you don't have the reliable asset that works for you, essentially, is you have a job. And I think that probably resonates with a lot of people when I teach this live. I see a lot of head nods and they go, ah, crap, I have a job. Your business or that particular offer may very well be middle of the barbell, right? Now over here, you might also have some partnerships you're exploring and a new offer and, some affiliate stuff that's not full partnerships, but you get some revenue. And if you look at this barbell now, and again, I'm zooming through this. If you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. When we look at this barbell, we have a ton of asymmetry. We got us working right in the middle. And we have a bunch of upside, potential perceived upside, and no reliable assets. So to me, from the marketing and the sales frame, when we're talking about, should I launch a new thing? Should I do a new thing? Should I add these things on to my offer? I would say no, because anything new, you are just adding to the unfavorable asymmetry of this barbell. Does that make sense? Dan, am I making sense here?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, it aligns with some of the stuff that we talk about in terms of the revenue pyramid and ensuring that we're not skipping levels.
Yep.
So similar concept, but different lens.
Yep. And that's kind of what I was hoping to bring, is a little bit different lens, because in the revenue multiplication class, right, again, the question becomes, what should I do? Should I do a new thing? What should I do? What I would recommend, and I think what we would recommend here, is we have to start moving some of this stuff, your business or components of your business, over to the reliable side.
Yeah, that is the piece that has to be identified before you can really move to the next level. Is not just, is it a good idea, but if you trade off one business for another, does the what happens? So you got business one and you got business two. Business two is new. So when you move from business one to business two, does all the income from business one go away?
Yep. And if it's not here, it likely will, right? At least a large chunk of it. So what I implore you to do on yellow legal pad, a spreadsheet, if you're in the platinum member area, I'll just give you this. I'll give you this worksheet here. You can do whatever you want with it. Just go file, make a copy. Fill this out. What to do with it, we could talk about on Friday or in later. This is really what the revenue multiplication class, it gets a little more granular on. But what you're going to see is you have a few things that feel like a job, and you have a few things that you're really hoping take off, and not many, perhaps nothing over here, right? Which is, this is the favorable asymmetry. You want this loaded up full of assets that are working for you. And we just see it. I want people to see it. So you can screenshot this. You can write it down on paper. You can make your own Excel sheet. I'll give you this sheet if you're in the member area. First thing, as part of just the Profit Flywheel, is I want you to fill this out. Okay, if you're watching, fill this out. There's gonna be a bunch of questions, and I'm just gonna address some of them right now. It does not have to be passive to be reliable. Okay, that's the first question. Is everybody thinks that they're in the middle. So I do have clients that think they're in the middle because they still have to work in their business. And the reality is, especially depending on where you are in the revenue pyramid, which is in the revenue multiplication class, you might have to work in your business. That's fine. The question is, if Dan goes in for 3 hours, 3 days a week and does XYZ, are we getting ABC result consistently? That's to get started with this barbell. That's how I would define reliability. You could take your business. What What I would actually do is take your individual streams of income and map them on here. Which ones have upside? That's going to probably be a lot of partnerships, a lot of new stuff. Which ones are reliable and known? Which ones could you not focus on outside of your regular day-to-day, and they would still fund your priorities? They would still bring in revenue and be profitable. Okay, so fill that out and see. I just want to bring it to attention how lopsided most people's barbells are, especially if you're a marketer. If you live in the sales world, you probably have a ton of stuff sitting right here. And if you're one of those people that can go in and put out fires and solve all the problems and wear all the hats and do everything better than everybody else, probably have a whole bunch of stuff sitting right here in the middle, right? So if we can identify all of this stuff, we can get into the revenue multiplication class, the frameworks, or you can figure it out on your own if you want. And we can start saying, hey, systematically, what things are we going to move over here to be reliable and known, so that the more things that we have over here, right, the more balanced this is, the more certainty we have. And if you're like me, you want to play with fun stuff, you could play over here with more certainty because you're covered over here, right? You're funding your priorities with things that are reliable and known, which allows you to play big and make big bets over here. So if you are one of those people that likes to bet on yourself and play big and yada, 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 the first thing to do is to move what you can over here. Fund your priorities with things that live on this side of the barbell. All right, Dan, do you have anything to add before I move on?
Well, I think that when folks hear reliable or predictable, the direction that they're usually inclined to head down is, I need more systems. I need to automate. And so that's not necessarily the answer, right? Automation is not necessarily always the right solution to solve the problem. I think it was last week in the Thursday revenue multiplication where I gave that quote from the author researcher Dan Heath, who says every system is perfectly set up to produce the outcome that it's generating, and so it's not necessarily that you need to automate. It's just that potentially the way that you design the systems are not in alignment with the outcomes that you want. And that's that whole unintended consequence thing that we talk about all the time. Because you weren't clear on the outcomes that you want, you designed a system that gets you further away from the things that you really care about. So not necessarily go automate all these things about your business. That may be a piece to it, but it's not necessarily the answer. We shared and it starts to get a little bit technical initially, and then we simplify, but part of understanding reliability is looking at just the volatility within your bank accounts and revenue. So if on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis, there's a huge distribution of ending balances, and your business has a lot of volatility. So it's going to make it hard to be reliable if you can go from $1 million to 10 grand to 2 million to 500,000, so on and so forth. There's just a lot of volatility. Same with the revenues. If there's a ton of volatility and you haven't mapped your expenses to be in alignment with that revenue volatility, it's going to be really hard to step away, even if you've automated, because you've built systems to produce that type of volatility. So you take a few days off and then you come back and you don't have any money. Now you got to jump back in and get involved. So it's not necessarily just systems and automation. It's about getting to the root cause, lead dominoes, understanding what's creating volatility.
Yep. So in our business, and I'll share this in later calls, this continuum is explore, exploit, right? Or the two sides of the barbell. What we have done in our company, Mastery Mode, is we built an entire team that's called Convert. And that is their only job they have, is not to take traditionally what people have done that have taught this. They take Explore and they systematize it. They automate it. And after a few years, it's not what they wanted, right? Because again, they build a system to engineer the thing to perfectly engineer whatever outcome. So we actually have a Convert team, and the whole purpose is to look at every angle of, is this funding our priorities? How do we remove volatility? Yada, yada, yada. So it's a really, really important step. Because again, the risk is just talking to the marketers, the salespeople, and the visionaries. We find a thing, it's exciting. Well, this is cool. Now let's automate it all, without fully understanding the dynamic complexities and the long-term consequences of doing so. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments or the chat. And we're going to zoom right over to the audience audit. See the chat here. I'm late. What did I miss? All the good stuff. So, well, second thing we're going to hit here is the audience audit. The audience audit. And again, once we go through our barbell here and we have this sorted out, we have all the things that have upside, all the things that maybe are sitting in the middle that need to be converted or eliminated. A lot of these things in the middle may just need to get eliminated. They may not be able to be made reliable. They may not serve our priorities, and there may not be enough upside to justify. So we also have to explore that, which is there's a lot of how to do that in the cash flow engineering masterclass. It's an audience audit. Audience audit, which means now we kind of have an idea where we're at. And there are two things that I implore everybody to do in order to generate cash on demand, in order to prepare to potentially launch a new offer. Dan had a great point last week about micro steps. So we want to get people to take these micro steps and start validating these things one step at a time, so that we don't waste a ton of time, effort, resources on something that either the market doesn't want or we don't know how to articulate or whatever. And so the two things I want to do. The first one's in the revenue multiplier workbook. Most of you have probably seen this. This is the champion list. This is simply where you see Dan. This is Dan, so I'm on there, but I'm also my own champion. Simply where we map out the people that think we walk on water, the people that love to talk about us. Everybody has those people that just think your offer, everything you say is gold. Everything you do is effective. And for some people, you know who those are. Others might not even believe that they exist, but I promise that if you have been in business for any amount of time, you do have people that really just think you're great. And if you go through the revenue multiplier class and you understand the diffusion of innovations, the diffusion scale, these are almost always going, or customers for life for that matter. This is going to be the most important place to start. So what you want to do is just list out. Dan has 20 here. You might have 20, you might have 40, you might have 50. Just start listing names and you'll be surprised at how many come up with. You want to list out the people that have great things to say about you and or your product or service. And then you want to rate them. What's the quality relationship? And we got a Fibonacci sequence here because, humans can't really tell the difference between like on the pain scale. Like, how much pain are you in? We don't know the difference between a 4 and a 5 or a 5 and a 6. So we just clump things. 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. How good's your relationship? What is the advocacy level? How likely are they to talk about you and say nice things about you? What is the quality of their audience? They might have a massive engaged audience. They might think you're the greatest thing to ever walk on this planet, and they don't have any friends or audience. So great, they're great humans, but they're not going to help us launch, pivot, or generate cash. And then how accessible are they? Right? There may be people that think you're the greatest thing on the planet and you can't get a hold of them, or they're too busy. They can't send an email for you because they gotta They got, you know, the next 6 years of their marketing plan lined out or whatever. And then Dan put a nice little multiplication here, or a nice little algorithm here that gives them a champion score. And so when we do want to pivot, when we do want to generate cash, when we do want to launch a new product or get people to take micro steps in order to validate our ideas, we want to start here with our best champions. These are people that they may give us honest feedback, but they're probably a little biased because they think everything we do is gold. But if Dan, and we've done this before, Dan can say, hey, Nick, I want to try this thing. And I'll say, cool. Let me make a Facebook post and send an email. And that gives us enough feedback to know whether we should take the next step or not. Right. So we just want a list of people that can help us get that data. We don't want to guess if we don't have to. Again, it's part of eliminating the risk and the unknown. Okay, so there's the champions list is in the revenue multiplier workbook. If you are in the platinum membership, you have it. If not, let me make it bigger. Take a quick look. You could screenshot it. You can make your own. You can use a yellow legal pad again. Some of this math, it's unless you have a ton, it's pretty obvious who scores high, who doesn't.
Can I add one dimension to the champion tab?
Yep.
So under column E, where it says quality of contacts, I have a general champion list, which is just generally speaking, how good are their contacts? But if you have a very niche, very specific offer that you're wanting to test, then you would want to reevaluate your champion list. Specifically, what are their quality of contacts as it relates to that product, that service, that niche, whatever it may be. Because mom and dad may have great contacts, but they don't have great contacts as it relates to a fitness offer. Just making up an example. And so I just reevaluate. I have a general list, and then when you're getting ready to make an offer or make an ask, just reevaluate your perspective of them related to the quality of contacts in that space.
Yep. All right. So champions list, that's where we start. That's actually, most people have an aversion to that. I don't say most people, most service providers have an aversion to that. People that have the best contacts typically have the biggest aversion to reaching out to them. And my assumption is that the reason they have the best contacts is because they've never tried to exploit them. And so this might feel like exploitation. So there's appropriate and strategic ways to approach these conversations, these asks, which we can cover at a later date, but compile, right? Right now I'm thinking about compile, which means do this work, have this so that when it comes up, especially if you're a platinum member or a private client, you can just bring it and we can have a conversation about it and tell you, hey, look, this is how I would talk to this person. This is how I would, communicate with them. Sometimes it's like, well, do I send them an email? And it's like mom or dad, right? Like you don't send your mom or dad an email, just go to dinner with them. Like, so those are the things that if you have this compiled, we can talk through and have a much greater effect than the typical, hey, send this mass email to everybody on your list. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for super high impact, get cash now, and gathering data to pivot and or launch new offers. Okay, so that's a champion list. Second one is we want to look at platform. This is just an example. A lot of people, I'm working with somebody right now who has a massively engaged audience and said, I want to launch a course. And the course will sell like crazy because the audience just loves her, always has. And I said, cool. Phone number, mailing address, email. Do we have those things? She said, no. That's a problem. That's a red flag. Right. And so what we want to do, and it's because they follow her on Instagram, which is great. The problem is, again, Instagram algorithm, we have no control over, and Instagram could decide tomorrow, we don't want to do stories anymore, which is where she, gets all the attention and drives all the traffic. So what we want to do is just a quick audit. And again, this is kind of a compile phase. If you have these things, you can come to the Q&A calls and say, hey, this is what it looks like. What should I do? You come to the revenue multiplication call and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. If it's here on the pyramid, this is what my audience looks like. What's my next step? And we can just workshop with you and give you custom advice. So we want to get email list, Instagram, your Facebook page, your Facebook friends. Maybe it's a Facebook group. These can all be separate tabs. LinkedIn connections, your podcast downloads, podcast subscribers, all these things. And we just want to start saying, okay, I got 40,000 on my email list. You know, and you could say they all opted in through XYZ. We could also say, and this is important, this is what we need in order to help you workshop through some of this stuff. Bought the list, they don't know who I am. So when somebody says, hey, I have an email list of 40,000, that could mean very, very different things based on how they came into your email list, right? I got this many Instagram followers, this many, you could say this many people on average watch my Instagram stories, whatever metrics you're watching, just get them all down here. Okay, we want to take a look at this and identify where is my audience. And then when we talk, Dan, again, brought it up yesterday, micro steps, what are the micro steps we want them to take? And it's primarily going to be, can we get their email? Can we get a micro step that says, hey, I want this, and in exchange, get their email, their mailing address, or their phone number? It is shocking how many people will give you their actual phone number if they actually feel like they have a relationship with you through social media, and you just tell them why you want the phone number. Right, and then we have here frequency of communication and how to pull it all together, which is probably something we'll cover either Friday or later on. Step one, do this. Compile this data. Say, I have this many on my email list, this many on my Instagram, this many on my Facebook. The number of people coming in right now, it may be COVID related, it may be shelter in place, it may just be coincidental. The number of people coming in right now saying, hey, I need help. And they just go live on Facebook and they blast it over to Instagram. And sometimes they send a weekly newsletter. I say, cool, what's your revenue? What do they respond to? So my revenue is this. I have no idea where it's coming from. I have no idea what they're actually responding to. I just know people go buy this thing, which is cool unless we want to launch a new offer, add a stream of revenue, or get some sort of control or certainty over that cash flow now, the ability to generate cash on demand. If we don't know what they're buying from and we got to generate cash right now, we don't know where to go in order to generate that cash. We don't know how to speak to them. They may be buying off video. They may be buying off email. They may be buying off podcast interviews. And so we want to audit this audience to the best of our ability. Okay. In the chat, does that make sense?
I'm going to say yes.
Cool. We're getting chats here. Cool. How many people have done this? Again, we might have back of hand. Oh, I got about 40,000 on this and 15 on this, but how many have it written down in a way that says nope, need to? Yep. Because we want to sit down. We want to say, and Dan's seen some of my stuff. I wish I had it up. I don't want to go search for it now. I even have my list segmented. So I'll say, okay, I'm going to launch this offer to this segment. Then a week later, I'm going to launch the same offer to this segment. And a week later, I'm going to launch, the same emails to different segments so that I can start determining, hey, we need cash flow. Who do we talk to? How do we talk to them? That's a little more advanced. It's like email stuff, but we at least need to know where's our audience hanging out. We might be spending 6 hours a week on podcasts and sending one email a month, and 90% of our revenue and purchases are coming off of email. We might want to audit or redistribute our time. But if we don't know, we just keep doing what we're doing, and then we have to do more of all of it in order to scale, right? If we don't know, if we haven't isolated these variables, then we just have to do more of everything. Or in reality, one more email a month or one more podcast interview a month could double your sales. So we just want to audit this. And again, when it comes, our primary thing here is the profit flywheel. When it comes to engineering your cash flow, launching a new offer, adding streams of income, getting this customer for life in place, and being able to generate cash now, which are the 4 things you need in order to fill out your revenue pyramid strategically. We have to know where this audience is. We have to know how to talk to them, and we have to know where they fall on the diffusion scale. Every one of your offers may have a different audience. That's fine. We need to kind of work through this stuff the best we can so we be super pinpointed and be efficient with our time and our resources. One of the things Dan says all the time is that we try to operate like Fortune 500s, the way people do their finances, but we're not. We don't have unlimited resources. So we have to be super intentional about the few that we do have. And for me, from the marketing frame, and from somebody that if you have one business or 5 or 10 and you feel like you're wearing multiple hats, you really have to start figuring out exactly where the audience is. 2 things here: figure out where everything falls on the barbell, figure out where your audience is, and then these tools can help you kind of work through or get into the revenue multiplication class. And in that class, we get far more granular about how to actually identify these things, move them over, and perhaps more importantly, which things actually need to get moved over in order to create a revenue pyramid that is not disjointed. This overlaps with R3. Yep, it does. So the offers to adopters, billboards are different. Yes. Yep. And we can talk about that on a Flywheel Friday. Cool. So
can I throw in a couple things, Nick?
Please do.
So as you're working through the audience audit and compile, we're taking these micro steps, and step 1 is taking a micro step where you can get control over the way that you communicate with them, because you really don't have much control over Facebook or Instagram or any algorithm that you don't own. But there's also this process of trying to understand where someone is at on the diffusion curve, and also, are they just a true fan? And you made a point of this a little bit ago about this, that sometimes people just buy from you because they're a true fan.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that is key, because if all your true fans buy in the first week, and so you've got this incredible week 1 of sales, but they're all true fans, it doesn't necessarily mean that the offer is scalable, right? You can get caught up in look at the sales number, and we just did pick a number that would be impressive to you. We just had this huge sales push in week 1. Well, yeah, they were all true fans. So do you actually have a process of growing, replicating your true fans? If not, this might not necessarily be a scalable offer in the way that you think. So when you go to cold or so on and so forth, you may have crickets, because again, who bought initially? True fans, just people who are going to buy whatever you put out there. So once you get the emails, and I think we'll talk about this more on Friday, those additional micro steps to identify where they really are at on the diffusion curve. Are they a true fan? How do you score them to determine if they're a true fan, so that you can really delineate the results from sort of get a clear picture of reality? Because I think what I've seen is folks think that they validated an offer and they go to scale, but in fact, again, they were just to your true fans.
Yep. Oftentimes, and I'm going through this with Customers for Life, full transparency here. Oftentimes, the offer. Oh, we don't have a diffusion. Oftentimes, the way that you launch an offer, you have validated something other than the thing you want to sell. So if I want to validate a course, but I sell it as a masterclass, I have validated the masterclass, not necessarily the course, right? And those are little tiny things that can make a difference, which I think we can talk about again on a Flywheel Friday.
Yeah.
That's the early adopters are always going to pay a little bit more for access to the expert or the, tribe leader or whatever it is. So if you're taking that away, it's a different offer moving forward. And some people don't realize that. So that's the way it goes.
There are so many micro steps. So, I mean, right now we're just talking about it through the lens of marketing and product offers, but in negotiation, you're also trying to take micro steps.
Yep.
I'm in the process of negotiating a new equity deal, and I was talking over with my wife over the weekend. She's like, "Well, why don't you just tell them the terms that you want?" It's like, well, we're actually like 7 steps away from that. And if we got to date, I think, again, back to the dating analogy that I'm so prone to go to, but before we get married, I make this big proposal. Like, there needs to be a little bit of romance, some dating leading up to that point. Otherwise, I seem like a crazy person. So the same is true in marketing. The same is true in just any sort of negotiation. Are you just jumping to a proposal right away? Or have you taken the micro steps? Have you warmed them up in a way where when you make the offer, they're not going to think you're a crazy person?
Yep. That is probably, I don't know how to build that, but that is probably something that we'll try to put together sometime, some sort of master class or course on the micro steps. Just I call it stealth influence. Just the moving people at the appropriate rate and showing them the appropriate thing, so that instead of pressuring them to move, which is an external pressure, you create an internal pressure. They feel the need to move in that direction.
Yeah, I think that the way that we do it now, we're just brainstorming a little bit out loud. But similar to the champion list, I do a similar thing if we're trying to migrate a client to a new platform, where one, you probably want to run in parallel, so you can actually test the new platform versus the old and identify things before they break. But you can imagine that some clients are going to be really open to it and some aren't, right? And in fact, maybe their perspective on it might be somewhat correlated to the diffusion curve. Like, our innovator clients are probably more open to new systems than our laggard clients, and so on and so forth. But it's not just that. It's not just the diffusion curve. There's other stuff to a relationship. Right? How long have you known them? When was the last time you changed something? So there's often 10 attributes, usually not less than 4 to 10 attributes of things that dimensions that you'd want to evaluate them on using the diffusion curve. And so basically you can determine what is 100% score. And so taking whatever it is, moving them to a new process, or launching something new, offer, so on and so forth, or what are all the dimensions, the downside risks essentially that we're concerned about, and let's score them, and then let's break them into buckets. So who has the highest scores, medium scores, so on and so forth. And based off who the highest score tranche is, that would be who you'd migrate first. Right? Now, this is qualitative usually. I can't, which is where it's a little bit more squishy. Like, we want to have the preponderance of data, but when we're evaluating someone on something nebulous like quality of relationship, like you kind of have to go based off your experience. So ideally, there's a mix of qualitative and quantitative, just like within the 4 lenses. So I think we could construct something similar, giving someone a net, basically the equivalent net champion score. Like, what is the net true fan score based off multiple dimensions?
Yep. And then that helps determine, again, the appropriate time to say, and I kind of built in customers for life, but it's similar to the question your wife asked, is like, you just have to understand, you don't talk to everybody the same way based on where you are in the relationship. There's just appropriate ways to talk to somebody in one phase and appropriate ways to talk to somebody in another. And so we can work through all that. Cool. We got 4 minutes. So what we can do is push I implore you to work through these things. If you're watching this, you can bring them to any Q&A calls. Wednesdays are wide open Q&A. So you bring them and we'll work with you. If you are not you don't have access to the Q&A calls on Wednesday. It's the CFE class, Cash Flow Engineering Platinum Package. So you get the full Cash Flow Engineering Masterclass, VIP access level, which means on Wednesday specifically, or any other days that we're live, but Wednesday specifically, you show up and all we do is we unmute everybody and we say, who's got a question? And we just talk. We just work through whatever you have ready. We work through it. I'll also give you the full, because I talked about it today. If you're in cash flow engineering, I'll give you the full Customers for Life book, all the templates, which is basically all the audience stuff I just did. It's templated out, how to actually move them around and talk to them and all that stuff. All the worksheets, workbooks, live support, we have a bunch. They are incredibly useful. I love the worksheets. I love the workbooks. Because sometimes when you sit down and you write it out, it becomes all these problems that we're trying to sort out become crystal clear when you see it on paper. When you see asymmetry, when you see a list of 45 things on the left side of the barbell and nothing on the right, it just becomes clear the kind of risk. Bonus quarterly workshops, basically just stuff like this, only workshopping through it. And what I have is not open, $36,000 network training. So that the audience audit, I also did about 5 of those, about 6 of those, also showing people how to actually move from one stage to the other, how to capture people, how to create a sales mechanism that works, all that stuff. If you are in cash flow engineering by the end of the week, we'll say the end of the week, I'll throw that into. And it's cfeclass.com/platinum. If you're watching this live on Zoom, you may already be in there. Hopefully you've been utilizing the calls. If not, go in the member area, save the dates, save the times, get in on the calls. It's very similar to this, only there's more workshop time. There's more Q&A. It's a lot more custom. And I'm paused right there because I'm going to edit this last part out. If you are not in yet and you go use coupon NEXT, so go cfeclass.com/platinum, use coupon NEXT, all capital, 50% off. So it'd be the equivalent of one payment of $597. It's actually like 2 payments of 200 something rather. cfeclass.com/platinum NEXT. If you want to know more about it, at the very bottom there, cfeclass.com. It's just Dan kind of walking through what's called the wealth blueprint, kind of break it down, some of the methodologies and the quick wins. Let's look at the Q&A. Any material to build your lists? Yeah, there's a million ways to build your lists. It really goes back to the question or the answer I think everybody hates, which is it depends. I've had success saying, hey, if you just want to like get on my list and hear from me sometimes, go to nickpeterson.com/bombs, which is my thought bombs. And that list grows. I just tell people to go on the list. Sometimes we give stuff away. Lead magnets and stuff. Books are great. If you sell it on Amazon, you're going to have a really hard time getting them on your list unless you self-publish and make it like the back cover. So it really just depends. Got somebody said just enrolled. Awesome. So make sure you join us tomorrow for cash flow engineering, and you'll have get into the cash flow engineering class. The login should have been sent to you already. Get in there, start going through at least the compile phase. And then if you have any questions, tomorrow's the best time to show up and say, hey, Dan, specific question about this specific thing. Tuesdays are reserved specifically for cash flow engineering. Thursdays for revenue multiplication. So cool. Welcome. Glad to have you. I think you'll enjoy the middle of the week calls. They're fun.
Those are my favorite. Yeah, Wednesdays when everyone's just unmuted and the topics that come up, they're just across the board. They're just business strategy more than anything. And so sometimes it's marketing, some product launch, specific finance thing. I mean, it's really across the board, which I think is a lot of fun. And I think we've come up with new product ideas for folks live in those calls. I saw Megan in here earlier, and I think based off one of the recent jam sessions, she launched a whole new offer that she pre-validated because she took the micro steps, right? And so it was an immediate successful launch for her. And that was like a 15-minute conversation. So those are the most fun and enjoyable to me. They also don't require the 8 to 12 hours worth of like preparation research that we do before like each class when we're teaching something live.
Yep. We got to codify all the stuff in Dan's brain. Some of the stuff in my brain, it is a long process. So showing up, answering questions, if that's what you value, if it's the mastermind, the custom, the conversational, the community, if that's the component you value, that is only available at a very, very high level for private clients, but much more, I mean, a ridiculous price here in the platinum member area, which is, what is that, like $1,200? And it's a year of that kind of access. So jump on it. I can tell you, I'm not going to tell you when, but this is part of the early adopter thing. The price will be probably close to 6 or 7 times that as we get rolling and near the end of this year. So get in now and your price will never change. You can just come hang out and we'll help you launch offers or re-engineer your cash or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, not getting into all the specifics, but the reality is like we've got more stuff lined up. So people who are part of the annual, that's the things that we're going to codify over the rest of the year. So there's at least two more big pieces that will be codified at some point before the year is up. It's just kind of one at a time.
Yep. And the cool thing, wrap up with this. This may not be compelling, but there's a certain segment of the population, which is mostly my kind of people, that I call it inception marketing. A lot of this stuff, I don't know anybody else that does this. I'm sure it happens somewhere. A lot of the stuff we do later in the year, like we may be coming up with today, and you just get to hear the conversation and figure out how we came up with it and where it fits, and then be part of it as it gets built later, which is it's kind of a behind the curtain inside look at like how we're actually making these decisions. Whereas sometimes, revisionist history, sometimes people teach why they did something and it's not actually why they did something. So it's a cool thing to be a part of. And again, you're invited. Link is right there. All the resources, all the assets, anything we have talked about, anything we talk about over the next 12 months from the day you enroll, you get access to. It just drops in the member area. And you pretty much get an open invite to anything we do, whether it's planned or not.
Yep.
Cool. Well, we will see you guys. For those of you that just enrolled in cash flow engineering, you now have access to tomorrow. So we'll see you tomorrow and hopefully Wednesday for office hours and then Thursday for the revenue multiplication.
Cool. Looks like we got one more question. Oh, thank you. Excited. Yeah. Excited to have you.
Cool.
All right. Okay, I think you're host now, Nick.
All right. Well, then I'm going to shut this thing down and we'll see you guys tomorrow. If not, hopefully we see you Friday.
Cool. All right.